Hi, everyone. Joanne Hamburg with the Real Estate Exchange, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Today, I have Kim Cole with Gatsby Ground Care, and I am excited because we're going to talk a lot about fall lawn care. Not that any of us want to think about fall coming, but here we are. So, Kim, tell us a little bit about your company and how long you guys have been around, where you're located, and some information for our followers.
Sure. We're located in Lunenburg, Mass, right on Route 2A. And we started actually back in like 1997, but hadn't started the lawn care until after that. We started off doing mowing and cleanups, and then we realized that we wanted to offer a fertilizer service because that goes hand in hand with the mowing and the cleanup work. And then we started to grow the lawn care, and now we do lawn fertilization, tree and shrub care, and hydro
seeding.
Yes. Yep, and hydro seeding. And now we don't even do the mowing and cleanup work anymore. We specialize in the lawn fertilization and seeding, and then what we call plant health care, which is maintenance of trees and shrubs with fertilizer and or insect and disease sprays to maintain the healthy landscapes.
Well, your company's been helping us. Like we were mentioning, my lawn at our home is absolutely beautiful. Between my husband and your company, you guys have done a great job with it. So, but if anyone has any specific questions while we're going through, feel free to type them in the chat. We'd be happy to answer them. But so in the fall, how often should we water our grass, our lawns?
Watering should be done about 3 times a week for 20 minutes per zone. You don't want to overwater and have things stay wet, which is why we recommend watering earlier in the day, not at night. So, but 3 times a week, because you get the morning dew also. So that kind of helps with the keeping the ground wet. But about 3 times a week, 20 minutes per zone.
Do you recommend a special type of fertilizer for fall lawn care?
Well, fall is basically to establish the root zone. So that's a good time where the grass is really putting in the roots. And so we prefer a fertilizer with a root booster. And that's a fertilizer that contains nitrogen and potassium. And that would be very helpful for the root zone development. And then if you're seeding, you can use a starter fertilizer. But if you're not seeding, then in Massachusetts, you're not supposed to be using a starter fertilizer because it contains phosphorus. So phosphorus is only for seeding, and you should be using a nitrogen and potassium fertilizer.
I know we had you guys come out and actually do a soil test. Is that something that we should do in this time of the year, or when's the best time to come out and just do like a soil evaluation? Like our lawn needed calcium or lime, I think it was.
Yeah, lime. Yeah, you can pull a soil test any time of year. You just want to be careful if you're pulling a soil test around when you've recently fertilized. So, we try to pull most of our soil tests first thing in the spring. So that way we know that there's no fertilizer like left in the soil from the fall. And it's before we apply the first round of fertilizer. And then we get recommendations for the whole season that we can go with. So if you need lime or if you need organic matter or any sort of other nutrients, then we can work those in throughout the season. You can do soil testing this time of year too, and just start planning ahead for next season. Just make sure you don't put down a fertilizer on Monday and then pull your soil test on Tuesday. You're going to want to pull your soil test before the fertilizer, or else your results could be skewed.
Do you suggest aerating, especially this time of the year, or is that something that should be done in the spring?
We do not recommend spring aeration at all. If you're going to aerate, you should aerate in the fall. Whether or not, you have a lot of traffic on your lawn is really what plays into the aeration. So if you have dogs and you have kids and you have parties all summer where people are constantly on the lawn, then your lawn is probably compacting at a higher rate than just normal. Lawns naturally compact. But if you have a lot of, like I said, parties or kids or animals that are running around on the yard, then you might want to consider doing it every year. We recommend doing it every other year for normal traffic. And then fall is the best time, because if you aerate in the spring, then that interferes with your pre-emergent for crabgrass and also can lead to bigger weed issues. So always aerate in the fall if you're going to aerate. And you can rent an aerator. You can call a lawn care professional such as Gatsby to aerate, or you can rent an aerator. There's a lot of rental companies that will rent aerators out.
I know we've had you out to do ours because ours is quite large and works out just nice. What about cutting the grass? Is there like a specific height? Like, should you leave it a little longer in the fall, or is it better to keep it shorter? I know when it's really dry, we try to keep ours a little bit longer, but what do you recommend for like a grass height in the fall?
Yeah, for like hot summer, we recommend like 4 inches tall. It seems a little long, but it helps to shade the ground so that when we get those hot days in the summer, it doesn't dry out the soil as quickly. As we head into fall, so like through September, you're going to want to start working down the mowing height to 3 inches. Because 4 is nice, in the heat of the summer, but once the temperatures cool a bit, you can go a little bit shorter and tighten it up a little bit. And then you go to the 3. And then the ultimate goal is to get it down to about 2.5 by Thanksgiving. So, September do 3, most of October do 3, and then you can start working it down to, a little under 3, all the way till at Thanksgiving, you should be at 2.5 before the first snowfall.
Oh, so that's interesting. That's good to know. I mean, so you should have it shorter in the winter. It makes sense.
You should, yeah, your last mow should be at 2.5, but please don't go from, 4 to 2.5, because that just stresses the grass out. So we said, start moving down like that little, your deck has the different settings, just, start working it down just little by little. Until you get down to the 2.5-inch height in November. So, but mowing at 3 all through September is fine, and beginning of October, and then you'll probably want to start working it down a little bit more as the temperatures start to get colder. But your grass growth slows as well too, so it's
so you just wouldn't be, and I don't think you'd be cutting it quite as often either.
No. I mean, once September, you'll be cutting it, especially if you're fertilizing it. It'll still be growing. It's nice and cool, and grass likes to grow. But once, right after Columbus Day, things start to slow down, and then November certainly starts to slow down. But there have been years where we've had warm Novembers, so it will keep growing. But you want to try to just make sure that you maintain, a height that is not too long, because in the winter you can have issues if you don't cut it short before it falls.
What about leaves? Like, they're all going to come down eventually. Do you recommend cleaning them up and getting your lawn so that the leaves are not sitting there, or is it better to leave some leaves on there?
I mean, I know people sometimes like to mulch the leaves, and that's okay as long as you're not doing it just waiting till the end and then mulching them out. Even when you're mowing, you're not supposed to be leaving piles of clippings all over the lawn. If you're doing it on a consistent basis, then that's fine. But with leaves, we recommend removing the leaf material, just because that the leaves and the pine needles and the acorn, they're acidic, and so they can affect the pH of your soil. So removing them, during the season, if you want to mulch your clippings, then that's fine to put the organic matter back into the soil. But when you're dealing with leaves, you really want to try to take them off if at all possible. So you can use a collection mower with a collection system, or you can use a leaf blower to blow them into piles and then collect them that way. A lot of places now have the waste days where you put them in those paper bags.
Brown bags, yeah.
Yeah. Or you take them to your local transfer station or whatever. But we recommend getting that stuff up and not letting them pile too thick onto the lawn, because if you do that, you're blocking the grass from the sunlight and getting water. So if you're watering, and then you don't want wet leaves on your lawn. So you just want to try to do it on a weekly basis to try to get up the leaves. So some people will try to wait until the end, and then it's just a lot more work to get them up off the lawn than if you were to keep up with it every week. But if you leave them on the lawn, it can block the grass and can also lead to insect and disease issues on the grass.
Interesting. What about dealing with weeds? Is it good to put down a treatment right before the snow?
No, I mean, if you're gonna spray weeds, like now is kind of the time to do it. Especially so you have to be careful because if you're planning on seeding, a lot of the broadleaf weed spray products have an interval of about 4 weeks between when you spray and when you seed. So, we're already on August 13th right now. So if you spray now, then you can still seed mid-September because you're going to have your 4 weeks. But if you wait until mid-September and you do a weed spray, if you're not planning on seeding, then that now is fine. You can spray the weeds anytime in September. But of course, be responsible about the rates that you use and make sure you're wearing the proper, personal protective equipment. But also you just want to make sure that, there are the best defense against a weed-free lawn is to have a dense, what we call a dense stand of turf, so thick lawn. So if you have a thick lawn, then the weeds are less likely to move in because the grass is competing with those weeds and trying to keep them at bay. If you have a lawn that has a lot of bare areas, you're going to see a lot more weeds because that's where the weeds love to thrive. So if you can get your weed control down ASAP and then seed in September to try to fill in all of those areas, you'll have much less weed problems next season.
Makes sense. When is the latest that you can plant seeds for grass? Like when would be the latest you'd want to put seed down for fresh grass in the spring?
Yeah, well, right now we recommend doing it as early in September as you can. So if you have your seed right after Labor Day, put it down, get ready to go. If you have applied something with the weed control, like I was mentioning earlier, then just allow the time for that interval to expire and then do your seeding right then. We try to have all of our seeding done by Columbus Day, which is usually like the second week of October. If you're in the Western, like if you're out in Gardner, Templeton, Athol, they tend to get cold earlier. So we try to say have yours done by the end of September. So you still get a couple of weeks of growing before the soil temperatures drop too low for germination. But you shouldn't be seeding in November, or late October even. I mean, we've had some warm Octobers, so sometimes people can push it a little bit, but it's really gambling if you try to do it that way.
We've had some nice Januaries too. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
climate change, I guess.
we try to use certain cutoffs just so that we're consistent year after year. So, because if you seed too late and it doesn't germinate, then in the spring you can't put down the crabgrass pre-emergence, and then you end up with weed issues in the spring.
How far does your company cover? Like what towns? Like how far from Lunenburg do you guys travel? And it's kind of just curious.
Yeah, we go west to about like Athol Orange area. North we go, in Central Mass we go up to Winchendon and Ashburnham, Ashby. South we'll go pretty much to the border too. We have down in Webster, Oxford. We go down that way too. And then east is kind of interesting. We go like northeast out to like Wilmington, Woburn area. We have a very large customer base out in that area. But we don't go into Boston. We usually stop at like Framingham type of area when we go east. Concord.
So you have a pretty big territory you cover. That's pretty great. Yeah. Is there any recommendations to like help protect your lawn for an early frost?
So frost is an interesting thing. It doesn't really harm the lawn unless you have like brand new seedlings. So when you have brand new seedlings, that's why we're saying like seed early, because you want that grass to be strong enough. So if we get like a frost in October, the grass is still strong enough to withstand that frost. If you walk out and you see the frost on your lawn, you shouldn't walk on it until the frost is lifted. So sometimes we have like 30-degree nights, but then the days are still like 50. So when you walk out, if you see it, you want to try to avoid walking on it because you can break the grass blades and you would actually see your footprint in the grass. Yeah. Some people have mentioned using water. So like if you have an irrigation system and you run your irrigation system, um, overnight, and then that helps with the frost. But not everybody has that option.
Yeah,
So
no.
we just say if it happens, if you walk out and you see the frost, then just stay off of it until you see the frost lift, and then you can go on it because it actually makes the blades of grass very stiff, and then when you walk on it, it will break them, and then the tips will brown. So you'll see footprints walking
Wow,
across the lawn where you walk. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah,
What
and the
what
shady areas of the frost will lift obviously slower than the sunny areas. So if you have areas of your lawn that are sunny, you might not notice there, but if you're walking around on your lawn and you have shady areas, if we had a cold night, just check those areas before you go on them.
Yeah, well, I always think about our plants because we're always like, oh my God, it's going to be a frost, so we better cover our
Covering, yeah.
plants tonight, and
Yeah, and I mean, I've had people cover small sections of newly seeded lawn
Mhm.
before, but you got to be really diligent about taking it off because you don't want it to heat up too much in there because then you kill it. So you want to just put it on maybe for the night, and then in the morning, first thing you want to do is uncover it. But again, depending upon the size of the area, you might not be able to cover it. So.
Any recommendations? I know for our home, I always spread around the house some stuff for like ants and spiders. Do you recommend any kind of treatment this time of the year to help prevent, ticks and spiders and ants from getting in the house and stuff?
Yep, I mean we do have we do offer ant sprays and insect tick and mosquito, so you can we can come and spray your foundation in your lawn and buffer for the ticks and mosquitoes. A lot of people in walkways and patios too with the ant spray, people having ant issues. So yeah, I mean we as a lawn care professional, we have the products that we can go out and we can spray. As a homeowner, you can get like the ant cups where the ants will go in and they'll take the bait and bring it back to the nest. So those are the kinds that really do the most are the most effective because they take it back. Because you remember ants and they build stuff underground. So even when we treat just the surface. So you'll want to get something that the ants can bring back to the
To the
nest
nest,
and
yeah.
try to get
Yeah, I
that
usually
from there. And then ticks,
spray this like
different cycles.
granule stuff around my foundation
Mhm.
because especially with all the rain we've had, the ants are starting to come up and
Yep.
I'm like, I don't want ants in my house. So
Right. No, they do make
usually
granulars
works.
too. Yep. And you just got to be careful and read the directions about watering. Some of them, might need to be watered in right away. So you got to spread it and then water it. They're activated by water. Some of them aren't. So it's just best, yes, the granular stuff too, if you're doing just around the foundation.
Yeah, just as long as whatever you put down doesn't kill your grass after all that hard work.
Right.
Getting
Yeah,
it
exactly.
beautiful and then you kill
Yeah.
it, that doesn't do
Yeah.
anything. Um, should I apply winterizer to my lawn? I'm not sure what winterizer is, so.
So winterizer is considered a fertilizer that is low in nitrogen, but also higher in potassium. So it does give the lawn just a little bit. The nitrogen is for food, so it gives the lawn a little bit of food, but it's higher in potassium, and the potassium helps build up the cell walls of the grass of the plant. So it is more insect and disease resistant. So yes, if you want to apply winterizer, then we recommend doing it in October. And we recommend finding a fertilizer that has a low nitrogen and high potassium. And so that'll still give the lawn some nutrients, but will not make it grow. You don't want to push growth that late in the season. So that's why we say low nitrogen. And you also don't want to have a lot of, you can get disease issues if you put too much nitrogen down late. Some people end with the root booster fertilizer that we were talking about in September, which is perfectly fine. But if some people want to add a little bit of extra nutrients to their lawn, then they can do the winterizer fertilizer. Yeah, just make sure it's not high in nitrogen.
We talked a little bit about, when you're cutting the leaves and stuff so it doesn't pile up. What about, how do you manage the thatching buildup? So like if you've been cutting the grass and feeding it back into the lawn and it's starting to build up, do you just rake it off by hand? Is that the best, or blow it off, or what's the best way to just remove that?
Yeah, a leaf blower usually doesn't do the job. You usually have to get some manual labor in there, or you'll have to rent a dethatcher. Sometimes, some people, if you have a large lawn, they make attachments that go on the back of mowers or tractors where you can dethatch. And then other people will rent, if they have smaller lawns, walk behind dethatchers that have spinning tines that can really get down. It rotates like this, gets down into the close to the ground, and it brings all the thatch to the surface, and then you have to go through, and you can use a leaf blower or a rake at that point, but you got to get it all up first. So we recommend, if you're going to do that, we recommend doing that before you aerate and overseed, because then that gets all that dead up before you put your seed down. And also you cannot dethatch newly seeded lawn. So if you seed this fall, you can't dethatch in the spring, because it is, well, you can, you just shouldn't, because it'll rip out, that root zone is not well developed enough, and you could rip out a lot of the new growth. So recommending doing the dethatching and then aerating and overseeding, and then you're done. You do not need to dethatch every year. That's not something you need to do every year. We would recommend kind of getting down and looking at your thatch layer to see whether or not it needs to be done. You don't want to, if it's pretty thick, then and it's staying wet, then you're going to want to dethatch, because you don't want to leave that root zone wet a lot of time. But if you just did it last year, then you won't need to do it again this year.
You mentioned a little bit about new lawns. Over in my community in Fitchburg, we have you guys hydroseed, and some of the residents have been getting weeds, which you never know what's in the loam. So when you have a new lawn and it's just been hydroseeded and you are getting the weeds that are coming up that are more predominant than the grass, what do you guys recommend to help turn that around?
Well, when you newly seed a lawn, the lawn is too new for any sort of weed spray. So if the weeds are really bothering you, then you have to pull them manually. However, if you just give it a little bit of time, then doing the mowing, so when the tallest areas reach 3 inches, that's when you want to do your first mowing. And then if you start mowing weekly after that, the grass will mature, and then we'll be able to come in and spray the weeds. So it just takes a little bit of patience in order, and you don't want the weeds to go to seed either. So like people sometimes are nervous to mow newly seeded areas. Once it reaches that 3 inches, you should be mowing it, because you want to get that grass to mature, and you don't want any of those weeds to go to seed, because then that just perpetuates more weeds. So we recommend, just keeping up with the mowing, and then once the grass has been mowed at least 3 times, then we can come out and we can do a weed spray, and then you continue to mow, and that grass continues to mature, and then you can do an overseeding, once that, like I was talking about before, the weed control interval. So maybe 4 weeks after, you can do a little bit more overseeding, or some people will just treat the weeds and then do the overseeding in the fall. So then that way, that's the best time to seed. The weed pressure is much less in the fall, because the soil temperatures are lower, and the crabgrass season is over. Broadleaf weeds don't sprout up as much. A lot of your weeds occur in late spring or throughout the summer.
We all want our lawns beautiful in the summer, and we never think that, like, well, we need to do it in the fall so that they're beautiful in the summer,
it takes
spring
a lot
and
of
summer,
planning.
you just don't think about it, it's like, yeah, I'll do it in the summer, but it's kind of late. You already got to be on it and thinking about it and getting it there. Do you recommend overseeding like on a yearly basis, or is that just something you occasionally do? I mean, we talked a little about the overseeding.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the what we call turf density of the lawn, which is like the thickness of the lawn. So if you have a new lawn, then you should probably overseed for the first couple of years just to get it to thicken up. But then once you have that the density that you want on then you're, I would say every couple of years, you just want to put in new, I mean, grass will naturally run its course, or it might get a disease one year, or it might get a little insect damage one year, or, maybe you rented a bouncy house for your kid and, that area needs to be reseeded. So there's always something that, can be rejuvenated, but we do recommend doing it at least every couple of years, but it's not necessary to do it every single year unless you have shade. If you have a very shady area of lawn, then the lack of sunlight does not allow the grass to photosynthesize the way that it needs to. And so we do recommend, if you have a very shady area, that it needs to be overseeded every year. But most areas that get partial sun during the day, you're fine.
Are fine, yeah. One of the things you and I had talked about over at my community, I have areas that I don't water, and you had mentioned that you have grass seed that doesn't need as much water, the less.
Well, yeah, there's grass seed that's more drought tolerant, so the fescue mixes are more drought tolerant. So when we do our seeding, like in the summer, we try to add a little more of the what's called turf type tall fescue, which will help with the drought tolerance. You still have to water, and with newly seeded stuff, seed needs water to germinate, so you still need to do that. But once it's established, the watering, you'll see it's more heat and drought resistant, so it puts down deeper roots and will search for water deeper than some of the other grass types, and will help throughout the summer months and is less likely to go dormant. But if we have a season like we had a couple seasons ago where we didn't get rain for 3 months, well, that's that's tough. But if we're getting relatively consistent rainfall, there is more drought tolerance to the turf type tall fescue.
Very interesting. Are there any specific challenges that we might have talked about that you think would be worth addressing as we get towards cooler weather, cooler climate?
I feel like people, when they in the fall, there's a lot going on. Kids go back to school, you have sports picking back up again, weekends get busy, but trying to keep on top of those leaves is important. And that final mowing and working it down is really important, especially for spring. So in the spring, if you happen to leave leaves on the lawn, I'll get to it tomorrow, and then it snows. You could have issues where you get all these dead spots, and then in the spring, and then you're trying to figure out, okay, well, am I going to seed and not use a pre-emergent, or am I going to just try to let it grow out? And so you can get a disease called snow mold, which is these dead areas that it's kind of when the grass lays on top of each other and we have a lot of snow covering, then you can get what's called snow mold. And all you need to do is really rake it out and let it grow out, and it's fine. But for a little while, it does look unsightly. But in the fall, if you just take the time to do that extra mowing or take the time to do those leaves, you have less of a chance of getting it because you don't have matted down areas on your lawn.
Awesome. Well, it's been great talking to you, Kim. That's a lot of wonderful information. Tell everybody how they can reach out to you if they want to get on. I know you have a maintenance program. If somebody's interested in getting a price on having you guys come out, which I thought was very reasonable. You do Woodland Estates, our community, and it works out great for the common areas, keeps the place looking good. So how would someone reach out to you if they wanted to get on a maintenance plan with you or as
sure. Our telephone number is 978-582-1594. Or you can go on our website, www.gatsbygrounds.com, and there's a contact form there where you can fill out your contact information for a quote. We do have site visits, so whenever you request a quote, we will go out to your property, we will put eyes on it, and we don't measure by satellite. It's not accurate, and we can't really tell what your lawn looks like from a satellite. So we will come out, we will take a look, and then we will make recommendations based upon the conditions that we see on your lawn.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all your real estate needs. Feel free to give us a call at the Real Estate Exchange, 978-582-4339, and keep an eye out for our next webinar coming up. Thank you, Kim. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.